to Fantasy Fomo. For those new to the channel, we take a data-driven approach to fantasy football. Our goal is to reduce FOMO by making fact-driven decisions. To stay up to date, like this video, click subscribe and the bell notification icon. In this episode, we are reviewing our forward options. So let's select player name and their points per match. We want to limit that to players for this year. So let's type in this year into the search bar. We also want to only include forward positional players. So let's just search for the position column and select our forward line. So these are players that can fulfill any of our forward positions. We also want to have a look at what their current salary is. And let's also include salary bands so we can get an indicator, a colour indicator. So what we can see here is a plot where the y-axis is our current salary and the points per match across the x-axis. And I also just want to limit this down to players who have played at least 2 matches this year. So go matches greater than 1. What I'd like to do is have a look at if we have any outliers in the player banding. We'll start at the lowest level of those that are less than 150k. So we can see here these are essentially our rookies that have played a number of games. So Anthony Scott's been playing quite well, Miles Bergman, Tyler Brockman. But where this is of interest, how does that compare with those in a slightly higher banding? And we can see here, there's no real outliers at this level. You know, obviously Anthony Scott is performing quite better than his peers that are slightly higher in value. So let's move to the next level and compare the 150k to 250k and to the next band of 250k to 350k. And this is where it starts to get interesting, and that we do start seeing some outliers here. We can see here that Chad Warner is performing much better than his peers that are a higher salary. So it's definitely, if you haven't got Chad Warner, definitely consider bringing him into the team. Some other ones of interest, we can see here Logan McDonald, who's had a stellar start to the season, and also Braden Campbell. Let's have a look at the fourth as well, and Thomas Berry, and Michael Fredericks as well. So we can see here that there's 5 candidates in that price range of 150k to 250k that you could bring in to your forward line with the potential of salary gains. That we can see that their points per match is performing proportionally better to players in the next banding of 250 to 350k. So let's have a look at the band increase to that, and let's just so we can see this a little bit easier, we'll just change the color scheme. So this is where it does get quite interesting in that across the board, you know, the performance of these two bands is quite similar in their points per average. So this is where we can actually look at saving some money. We can see here that Jack Zeeble, Josh Bruce, Jarman Impey, and to a lesser degree, Keziah Pickett, Tom Atkins and Samuel Switkowski are performing much better to their peers at a much higher salary band. So with the outlier being this is Taylor Walker, who's had an unbelievable start to the season, nearly 140 points average. So we can also see that Lockie Fogarty, Harry Mackay, and Jamie Cripps. So this is potentially an opportunity that, you know, we could go with a lower priced player. We can see here that Jarman Impey is currently at $288,000 for his current salary, and the points per match is 98.33. Whereas if we were looking at, say, Harry Mackay, we're saving nearly, nearly $80,000 for not that much difference between the points per average. So 98 versus 104, or even Lockie Fogarty, who's, you know, exceptional points per match of 110. But again, is nearly 100k more expensive. So if you're looking at maybe Lockie Fogarty, the player to potentially look at is Jack Zeeble, who's performing outstanding. and again, Taylor Walker. And we'll see that Taylor Walker is an outlier that you really need to consider. So let's have a look at, the including the band above that. And this is where it does get interesting. So we're starting to get into that premium price range, and we can see here from a performance perspective, these players that are currently priced in that 450 to 550k are really grouped around this high 90s to 110, which we're seeing from Jack Zeebles, Josh Bruce, might be an outlier for last week's performance, and Jarman Impey, but proportionally saving a lot more money. So we see here we've got Zach Butters at nearly 500k, Isaac Heaney, similar price, Toby Green, Dane Zorko, and Tom Hawkins, who very highly priced at mid 500s, but at the moment are only going at just under 90. So again, this is where we can start looking at the Jack Zeebles of the world and Jarman Impeys, $200,000 cheaper than these premium price players in the forward line. And finally, let's include the final bracket. And again, we can see that Taylor Walker. So Taylor Walker is performing outstandingly. And again, Jack Zeeble, Josh Bruce, for their price, and Jarman Impey are performing exceptionally as well. So we're having a look at who the primos are. We can see Josh Dunkley and Dustin Martin. So if we just again include all the current players that have played more than one match for forward line players, we can see here there are some options that if you have to make correctional trades or even look at who is going to be the top 6 players this year. Is Taylor Walker going to be able to maintain this average of points per match throughout the season? The next two, as we can see, is Josh Dunkley and Dustin Martin. But this is where it does get interesting, and I think this is where the opportunity is to build your team around players that are a lot cheaper at this point. So we've got Jack Zeeble performing exceptionally. Again, Josh Bruce is something we need to monitor, and Jarman Impey. And then we've also got Lockie Fogarty and Harry Mackay. So this is fantastic. It's giving me some insights of players to focus on, even to bring in this week. So before we close this out today, I just want to leverage a feature of this product called SpotIQ. So this leverages artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify if there's any outliers in the data that could be of interest. So I'm just going to run this as a background task, and this is where I can select any of the columns in our data set to do this analysis by. And for this scenario, I just want to select all the columns. And this is all the columns in our data set. And just run the analysis. So this will run as a background activity, which we can then navigate to see the results. So we can see here the analysis is running. And we can see here that the analysis took roughly 30 seconds to run, and we can review the results. It's identified a number of insights. So if we just look at what SpotIQ is showing us here, that's found 9 insights by analysing 2,000 intersections of data in about 23 seconds. So let's have a look at that. So the first one here is that if we're having an analysis by player name, there are 2 players with significantly higher total points than the rest for the salary banding of 150 to 250k. So these are outliers that we need to consider. So there's 2 insights. So the first is Chad Warner here. Total points per player is statistically an outlier in comparison to the other players in his salary band. So this is of interest that really, if we haven't got Chad Warner in our team, this again reinforces that this is a player we should consider. And if we just have a look at the second insight, so this is points per match. This is the average points per match. And again, we can see here that Chad Warner is an outlier in this. And so as we can see, significantly higher points than the other 18 values. So let's have a look and see what other items the machine learning component has highlighted for us. So the standard deviation. So the standard deviation is returning a calculation for how much variance there is between players' performance. So in Supercoach, this is where we want players to have very low standard deviations. That means their points per match is consistent. So again, it's found 2 insights. The first one here is that there are 2 players where the standard deviation is much higher than their colleagues in the 150 to 250k salary band. So these are Braden Campbell and James Rowe. And we've seen that with their performances this year. They've scored very, very highly, but their bottom values are quite low. So there is a lot of variety. So this is something to consider if selecting these players. That yes, they can deliver high points, but they can also go missing. And if we look at the second one, and we can see here actually in 250 to 350k banding, we can see here Josh Bruce is an outlier in that we can definitely, from his performance last week, kicking 10 goals, returned an excellent points per match for last week, but is this something he'll be able to consistently return? So let's have just a quick look, see what else there is. Points per match by player name. So this is highlighted in the 350 to 450k salary band that Taylor Walker is our outlier. Let's have a quick look. What else do we have here? And 250k to 350k salary bands. That Jack Zeeble is statistically much higher than his counterparts at this tier of salary. So again, these are two players that you really need to consider as potential short-term cash cow gains, that they're performing much above their salary band, but even the potential to move into the premium bands and be kept as top 6 players. So that's it for today. We had a quick look at how our forward line players are performing, and just wanted to share this component of the product here, SpotIQ, and how machine learning and artificial intelligence may be able to help us with our Supercoach performance. That's it for this episode. Please leave your feedback and any questions in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.